We're now moving into Book 9 of the Iliad, a very important book indeed. And it begins with the warlord Agamemnon, the leader of the Greek expedition, essentially with his head in his hands. The Greeks have been taking a massive beating. Hector is running amok. He is killing and slaughtering Greeks left and right. He is pushing them back toward the Greek ships. They're not at the ships yet, but they are in retreat. And Agamemnon gets the idea that basically we've lost. We should quit. We should go home. Enough of this. We're not going to take Troy. Apparently the gods are against us, and this is just never going to work. Now, interestingly, this is sort of the second time Agamemnon has said this to his troops. In the very beginning of the Iliad, we have a scene where Agamemnon says to the Greeks something to the effect of, "Hey, is it time for us to go home? Are you guys really ready to leave?" Now, Agamemnon is playing a trick at that point on his troops. He wants them to all come back with, "No, never, we are not going to go home." And his idea is to actually boost the morale and the fighting vigor of the Greeks. But to his astonishment, there's a divided reaction from the Greeks, and a whole bunch of Greeks are like, "Great idea. Let's go home. Enough of this. We're not, we've had it." And so at that point, there is an intervention by other leading Greek fighters who say, no. They restore the morale of the troops, and the Greeks decide to stay. So it was a little bit of a close call, even in Book 1 of the Iliad. But here we are in Book 9, and Agamemnon is now apparently seriously saying, quote, "This is my command for the entire army. Clear out with our ships and head for home. There is no hope that we will take Troy's tall town." It's not happening. And it takes the Greek warrior Diomedes to jump in front of Agamemnon and basically say to him, "Listen, if you want to go, you go. We're not going. We're staying." And so Diomedes gives a kind of thunderous speech where he says to Agamemnon, "You know the way. Your ships are here right by the sea, and maybe your fleet will follow you right all the way back. But many a long-haired Achaean," the Achaean is Homer's word for the Greeks, "many a long-haired Achaean will stay until we conquer Troy." And then he says, "The two of us, still Nellis and I, will fight on until we take Ilion." Ilion is the Greek name for Troy. "We came here with Zeus." So Diomedes is saying, no, Zeus does not will that we return. We have Zeus. We are doing the will of Zeus in taking Troy. True, we're facing a setback, and maybe Zeus has decreed it that way, but nevertheless, this is our destiny. This is our fate, and we're not going to go back on that. Now, interestingly, at this point, the wisest of the Greeks, and you might expect me to say Odysseus, but Odysseus is not the wisest of the Greeks. He's the most clever. He's the most facile. He is the best at persuasion and debate. But the wisest of the Greeks is an older man named Nestor. And this guy Nestor we meet him in the very beginning of the Iliad. He's trying to patch up the quarrel between Achilles and Agamemnon. Basically what he says is, cool it. He says to Agamemnon, "You should not have deprived Achilles of his prize, Briseis." And then he says to Achilles, "Even though you have been wrong, there's no excuse for you, the best of the Greek fighters, to somehow start sulking and quit the battle. You need to Agamemnon needs to make good, and you need to make good, and we need to go forward and do the job that we came here to do." So Nestor tries to do this, but his prudence and his wisdom and his diplomacy fail. Why? Because Agamemnon is too stubborn, and Achilles is too angry, and neither of them will relent. But what happens here is that Nestor sees an opportunity to try again, this time only with Agamemnon, not with Achilles, who's nowhere to be seen. In fact, Achilles is away with his own troops, sitting basically by the side of his tents, doing nothing and refusing to change his mind. And so Nestor basically has a talk with Agamemnon where he says, "Listen, You need to admit that you were wrong. You need to send some emissaries, not you, but some emissaries who represent you, to go to Achilles and convince him to change his mind. And in order to do that, you have to offer him a very generous recompense, a very generous set of benefits that are going to more than restore his honor, his teammate. You've got to show Achilles that you are genuinely repentant for having wronged him. And this way, we don't have to quit. We don't have to go back. We'll have our best fighter, Achilles. The tide of the battle will turn. And so Agamemnon agrees to A, admit that he's wrong, and B, send a very carefully chosen delegation of 3 people, we'll talk about this next time, to go to Achilles, to offer him a very handsome recompense and to see if he can be persuaded to return to the fight.